How to record the drums in the home studio. Drum recording is one of those things that you need to get right. There's much less room for experimentation in drum sounds. What I mean to say is, you can have the most alternative guitar sound or affected vocal sound in the world, but if the drums don't sound right, nobody is going to care. Sure, you can experiment with different mixing techniques and try different production tricks later down the line, but the first order of business is to nail the drum sound. If your kick drum sounds like a cardboard box beaten with a marshmallow, then no amount of mixing is going to fix it. Get it right at the source or don't do it at all. Correct placement and microphone selection is important to the sound of your recorded drums, but so is the room you are recording in. Let's get busy with some drum recording tricks. Room. Clap your hands. Say yes. No matter the indie music, not a big fan. Clap your hands. Do it. Right now. If you are in a typical office or living room, the opportunities won't last long. The echo will fade away within a second because the size of your room does not allow much echo or reflections to build up. Now, imagine you were in a gymnasium and clapped your hands. The magnitude of the echo and its frequency are determined by the size of the room you are in. So clapping your hands in a large gymnasium will lead to more reflections, greater resonance and a longer fade time for the sound of clapping your hands to calm down. So, if we were to record drums, we needed to take the room into account. Since those reflections from the pounding of a hand are nothing but a peanut compared to the amount of echo and reflection an entire drum set would make inside a gymnasium, your ears heard them, and your mics sure will, too. If you have a portable recorder, which today means a laptop, an interface, some microphones and access to some different rooms, you can create a completely different sense of drum sound depending on what you choose. Many engineers choose a dead or very quiet room to track the drums, as this will allow them to add. How to record the drums in the studio. The kind of frequency they want later during the mixing process. While this method is sound and valid, just look at all those great rock recordings that were made before the digital resonance came to light. Recording studios used to have live rooms with amazing drumming sounds in them, and that became an inherent part of the sound of the drum. If you want to go the safe way, try to find a nice, preferably voice-treated room that isn't as lively as possible. But if you do want to experiment, finding a great or interesting room can yield some great results. Pre-production. Make sure you replace each cylinder head and adjust it so each cylinder looks great in itself and as part of the kit. If you or a drummer don't know how to tune the drum properly, I really don't know how, and most drummers are really bad at it, so get someone who can. Great drum kit and great sound room and you win half the battle. Next, we have to look at the types of microphones we want to use. Choose the microphone. Some considerations when choosing the right microphone for drum recording. How many microphones will you use? Are you trying to lift the kit with only one microphone? Then a large sounding capacitor should be your best bet. It is a wide frequency response and will capture the group with greater accuracy, especially compared to a dynamic microphone. Condenser mics. Small or large diaphragm condenser mics are usually the preferred default mics used as overhead devices. The overhead microphones are placed over the drum assembly to capture the general sound of the drum assembly at close range. The capacitor has the ability to capture all the nuances of the drum assembly, from the low end of the kick cylinder to the dash of cymbals. Dynamic microphones can take up more volume, but they lack frequency response and capacitor resolution. They can take pounding and kick drum size and have no problem with the incredibly high hits of the trap. If you decide to mic close each drum, you usually choose a good sound dynamic in each drum, kick, decoy and all of tom. Ribbon mics tapes may be a good option if you can afford them, especially if you use a few mics. The strips have a smoother sound, but they are more sensitive than a medium capacitor, and are crisper than strong dynamic. Remember, every microphone looks different and they will all be a piece of the drum recording puzzle. Set of tools. One of the things you should be aware of is that recording drums can be more complex than recording a normal instrument with only one sound source. Take singing for example. The most common way to record vocals is to place a microphone in front of a singer's voice source, that is his mouth. But when you record drums, each drum is a sound source, and you also need to depict the overall sound of the group as a whole. This is why modern drum recording puts a microphone on each drum and then some overhead mics to capture the full range. People want to control each drum as a specific sound source and then treat the whole drum kit as one sound source as well. Then, by mixing and matching the total volume of all tracks in the mixing stage, people have more control over the types of sounds they can get from their drums. Kick drum. I don't care what anyone says. The kick drum is the most important part of drum sound. You could argue that the snare sound is all you want, which is definitely important, but if the kick drum lacks strength and definition, then the whole drum sound will suffer. A kick drum is also the hardest sound to get properly given that the position of the microphone plays a pivotal role. Microphone your best bet, if you only use one microphone for drum recording, is a large dynamic microphone, such as the AD112, AUDEX D6, or Shure Beta 52A. They usually have the necessary frequency response to get the thick low end paired with hitting the beater. Placement. The default to try is the inside of the outer head only. I hope there is a hole in the outer head, pointing towards the axis, or slightly away from it towards the beater. In this position, the microphone is far enough away to capture both the boom and the sound. Microphones near the inner head, the side of the beater, cannot capture the full resonance of the drum, because they face away from the drum and capture too much click of the beater. Placing the microphone outside of the casing can give you great results. But there is a possibility that the microphone picks up a lot of bleeding from other drums and that it will lack definition from the beater. Great if you want natural bass drum sound, but bad if you want thick, isolated clicking. The best of both worlds? With two microphones, you can pick up both the paddle and the arm by placing the microphones in different positions. Placing one inside a group near the head of the beater and the other directly outside the jacket will create two different sounds that can be mixed together for great results. Boundary or PZM pressure zone microphones work well inside because they interact well with transients and can usually sit on the cover. By combining PZM that reacts well to transients, initial attack upon beater and great dynamics that picks up the low end on the outside, you get the best of both worlds. Snare drum. The snare drum is the master of the backbeat, and thus must sound great in order to capture the groove. Whether you are producing a heavy rock song or light jazz, careful consideration must be put into the snare drum sound. Microphone. A trusty Shure SM57, or any other type of dynamic is a great starting point when capturing snare drum. If you're looking for a different, more vintage sound, then using a large condenser or a ribbon can give the snare a much different feel. Take into account how loud the drummer will be hitting the drum. If he's going to be whacking that drum for all he's got, then a condenser might overload too easily, leaving you with a distorted snare instead of a smooth and full sound. Placement. Consider angling the microphone 45 degrees into the middle of the drum to get the right amount of attack from the snare. For a rounder sound, you can angle the microphone into the edge of the drum. Make sure that the microphone isn't in the drummer's way, since whacking the microphone will not result in a better sound. In general, for more harmonics, angle the mic towards the edges. But if you want more resonance and/or attack, then angling the microphone more towards the middle and center will yield greater results for each respective sound. Above and below, if you want to achieve a direct sound from the top but want to accent the rattle the snares, you can place another microphone underneath the snare pointing up. If you decide to do this, make sure you flip the phase of the undermic either during the recording or at the mixing stage. Most audio programs have a phase invert switch that allow you to flip the phase of your waveform. Hi-hat. If you want to increase control of the hi-hat during the mixing phase, adding a separate microphone shouldn't hurt. Microphone: you usually want a small capacitor for recording hi-hat. Given the fast-paced, fleeting nature of the hi-hat, you want to capture all the definition and clarity of the hi-hat, even though you're recording a rock track in the garage. Placement: placing the condenser on the rim gives you a completely different sound than placing the condenser on the center bell of a hi-hat. Also try to center it and angle it to or from the edge until you find the sound you're looking for. Above or below? Some people swear not to exaggerate the bullshit, and others don't see why anyone would do such nonsense. Personally, in live mode, I put the microphone under the hi-hat, facing up, but while recording it's the opposite. Why? I do not know. Maybe just a force of habit. Toms. The cylinder gaskets should sound well. Drums need to be clean, defined, and tuned. There is nothing worse than tom who rings for seconds after he hits. Assuming you've made all the arrangements and are sure that each drum is sound as good as possible, all you need to do is worry about the right microphone and its location. Microphone: dynamic microphones like the Audex i5, Shure SM57, or Sennheiser MD421 are a good bet for capturing Tom's full and powerful voice. Especially if you play any kind of rough music, going dynamic is the way to go. Experienced engineers sometimes use capacitors and even strips. But as always, you have to be careful not to overload those more sensitive microphones. In live audio, I have been using XC519 clamp capacitors for dummies. They work really well with P. It can work well in the studio. Every sound company has a drum kit that is usually a good bet if you don't have anything to work with. The placement of the microphone is very similar to that of the snare drum. If you want more attack and sound from the blocks, you have to aim it towards the middle. If you want a thicker sound, you have to point it down toward Tom's edge so that the microphone picks up the full resonance of a boom under it as well. If you have an awful lot of mics, a great set in a nice sound room, then you'd add more mics to the sound, right? Yes, well and no. If you have the resources for a tomb-side microphone, you probably shouldn't read this article. But the same rules apply as if you were recording the trap with two microphones. Beware of phase and make sure both mics pick up on something different. Overheads are usually placed over the drum kit, both to capture the complete kit but also to accent the sounds of the cymbals. There are a few microphone techniques that you can use to accurately and effectively capture both the cymbals and overall drum kit. You don't have to worry about phase problems when using the stereo technique since they are a coincident technique, meaning that you place them beside each other at a 90 degrees angle facing down onto the drum kit. This is the typical one microphone over each side of the drum kit. It's a good rule of thumb to adhere to the 3-1 rule so that if you place one microphone a foot 30 centimeters over the cymbal, the other microphone must be placed at a distance of 3 feet or 90 centimeters. Accent the cymbals. Just like engineers that place microphones on the hi-hat, Some engineers want to accent specific symbols. For example, if we are recording a minor blues shuffle, we might like to record that crucial ride cymbal, giving you added control over its sound during the mixing stage. Room ambience. We've talked about how to mic up every individual sound source of the drum kit. That is, every drum has been covered as a single sound source. Now we need to step back and look at the drum kit as one instrument. When we use room microphones, we want to capture the complete kit as well as the room that is complementing it. If you are in a dead room, there should be more thought put into capturing the kit as one instrument, whereas in a great sounding room, there is more preference to finding a good spot where the room and reflections help heighten the drum sound to a different level. I'd like to say that anything goes here. If you are trying to get a nice sounding complete drum kit sound, then a large condenser will do the trick. However, ribbon microphones can do a very similar job, and often a better one since they sound so good. Even normal dynamic microphones can be used to get an extra dimension to the drum kit by placing it in the room. Placement. Placing a simple SM57 in front of the kit facing up towards the ceiling can give you some ambience from the room. A condenser that you want to use to capture the complete drum kit without adding too much room ambience should be placed at around waist level facing towards the kit. To get the drums an extra stereo dimension, two condensers can be positioned in the upper corners of the room. Conclusion. We've covered some important aspects of recording one of the most complex instruments that us engineers face. The complicated puzzle of multiple types of microphones, placements and techniques is sure to make the beginner engineer nervous. But if we break it down into small pieces, looking at each drum as part of the puzzle and then combining it into one sound source, we can more easily understand what makes drum recording such a difficult, but ultimately enjoyable subject.